Thank you very much. I'd like to welcome you all here and welcome the press sitting over there, very lonely. Welcome, Victoria. Mike, would you, Corona, would you open our meeting, please? Thank you very much. We do have a quorum, so we will receive any notices. One from Paul.
Yeah, just very briefly, Chair. I'll have to duck away at 2 o'clock if we're not finished by then.
That's an apology. We'll get on to that in a moment.
Okay.
Notices and apologies. One from Paul. He has to duck away. Matu, you're so you're going to be back at your marae. So that's 2 hours. So you have to leave here. So I think we'll probably be gone by then. Maybe not. And also have apologies from James Palmer. He is sick today. So we've got Liz and Tom to help us through any challenges. Okay, do we have someone to accept those apologies? Paul, Benton, thank you very much. All those in favour? Aye. Any conflict of interest declarations that are not already recorded? So I look around the table, we are a small community full of conflicts of interests, and we have to just learn how to deal and manage them. So are there no new conflicts? Then we'll move on. Confirmation of the minutes. Going to presume that everyone has read them. Toro was the chaired that meeting. We had a very good presentation from Toro's daughter. I thought that was quite outstanding, and we had the verbal presentation on the science, of course, which is a huge issue for Heratonga. Is there anybody will move that those minutes are correct, or are there any changes that anyone will move?
Yeah, no, I'd like to...
A change?
I would like to make a comment on one of the minutes, and I'd like to change it. On page 5, second bullet point down from the top, over 8,000 water balls located in the region all give potential contamination risk. I'd like to see that taken out. It's irrelevant to the argument about oil and gas exploration.
Well picked up.
It was part of the meeting, Chair, these are minutes, and that was part of the discussion.
I'd like to, therefore, Chair, if that's the case, I'd just like to see it amended to say that over 8,000 water balls are located in the region.
The discussion was that was a ridiculous comment. It was a ridiculous comment, and it still is a ridiculous comment to compare water contamination with oil contamination. Thank you, Councillor Bailey, for pointing that out. I do want the minutes amended, and if anyone else has any strong views, clearly Councillor Hewitt and Councillor Wilson do. Does anyone else have any thoughts on this matter? I could see the angst on your face, mate. Welcome, Councillor.
All I'd say, Chair, is it's a reflection of the discussion on the day. If you don't like it, sometimes we don't like what's said at meetings, but it is a reflection of the discussion on the day.
It was counted, though.
But even so, it was still said.
Well, it doesn't say it was counted.
My point is, sorry, Chair, if I may interject there. My point is that the wording of the discussion is actually factually incorrect and misleading. So I'm quite happy to just have the point noted that over 8,000 water balls are located in the region. I'd be more than happy for just that to sit in the minutes.
Point of order again, Chair. Point of order. I mean, it doesn't matter what you like or dislike. If there's going to be a change to the minutes, it needs to go to the meeting, and it needs to be a vote on it.
Well, that's a new policy, Peter.
Well, we did it for 3 years previously.
No, you overruled.
You overruled it. You wouldn't have a change of the minutes.
I moved a motion to do it, and you ruled me out of order.
Well, we're living in the past, Chair.
They're quick and viral, mate. I suppose factually it is correct. It's just a matter of degrees because, of course, they are potentially, Havelock North proved that. A very shallow bore around a whole lot of sheep faeces is not a great idea. What do you want to do, Councillor Bailey? I feel your frustration myself. Yes.
We can either look at this as an oil and gas discussion or a water contamination issue. You know?
That's right.
You know? Yeah. So I don't know who raised the issue, but it
Councillor
certainly wasn't me because I didn't know there was 8,000.
No, Councillor
Wolves.
Hewitt did,
But
as a way of
I-
saying that the oil wasn't risky.
If I may offer a suggestion, Chair, I'm quite happy to let the matter lie in the minutes as it is. We've had this discussion in public and it's on video record, so I'm quite happy for that to happen.
Okay, I accept that. Right, any other amendments to the minutes? Okay, do we have a mover to accept that the minutes are a correct reflection of the discussion? A mover? Tom, second Fenton, all those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Thanks for picking that up, Councillor. Follow-ups from item 4, follow-ups from previous Regional Council Committee meetings. Liz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Morena, members of the committee. Can I just make one amendment, please? Item number 4, which is the tank plan change, iwi hapu engagement plan, which was scheduled to be on this agenda, has had to be deferred until November because there was staff sickness and she was unable to complete the agenda in time to meet our deadlines. So that will be going to for the November agenda. The remainder of the follow-ups from the September meeting, I think, are fairly self-explanatory. We've had the first of the Huia Iwi on Regional Council Māori representation, which was held at Tai Whenua o Heratonga on Monday night, and some very good feedback on that, and another 3 to come in Central Hawke's Bay next Monday, Wairoa next Friday, and then in Ahuriri here on 25th of October. Really, Mr. Chair, that's probably all I need to update. I'm just happy to take questions unless Mr. Skirman's got anything else to add.
Any questions? Then do we have someone to move that we accept those follow-ups?
Yeah.
Toru? Down here, Nikki? Was it Joanella, was it? Joanella. Uppy, thank you.
Good morning.
Good to see you, mate.
My apologies for lateness, Mr. Chair.
You look very sharp in those glasses too, by the way.
Thank you.
I need you to advise me on my fashion. Okay, right. All those in favour? We have a moving. All right. What's that, Mr. Moorhead? Okay, now item 5. Call for minor items not on the agenda. Just to kick it off, Tom, I was wondering whether you could do a quick update on that report you read on seismic testing.
Seismic testing.
Thank you very much. Ahuriri Estuary, there's lots of issues around that. Thank you, Neil, if you could just give us a quick...
So that's an urgent item, Mr. Chair. Is that what you're asking for now?
No, I'm talking about items not on the agenda, just if you can give us a bit of a dissertation of your thoughts on that.
That's the page I'm also onto now. So you're asking for an urgent item on the agenda, or a
No, I'm asking for a business not on the agenda, if you can just give us a quick update on that.
Sure. So
Not an urgent item.
it's not an urgent item.
No, it's minor item.
I think it's an urgent item.
What about an urgent minor item?
I think it's urgent too. I'm not sure how we cope with that. It is. Okay, no, just put it on.
It's a minor item.
No, I hate to call it that. I get your point. It is going to be on item 10, okay?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, on item not on
So
agenda.
we call that poisoning. Is that
Yeah,
the one?
that's a good way to do it.
Which is not
also-
urgent. for
Yeah.
some.
Peter,
Yeah, well, we
I'm just going through my list and then I'll come to you, Uppy. Peter, could you just give a 2-minute update on the coastal hazards as well at the end?
Yeah, I'll try not to turn it into 10.
That's what. Did you get the 2? Did you?
Mr. Chairman.
I've just got a few more.
Yeah,
I'll get through them. Whakaki Estuary, I want to talk a little bit about that, and Lake Pokawa. So I'll do those 2. Right. Any other minor items? Uppy.
Yeah, one minor item, please, Mr. Chair, with regards to the terms of reference for the RPC and the Tangata Whenua reps. It's sort of disappeared off the table. We'd like to get an update as to where that's at in the next agenda.
Who do you want to talk to? You want someone to talk to that, or you want to talk to?
Most likely our officers, as I think it's in their court at the moment. Thank
Okay.
you.
What have you got on?
2 things. One, I wouldn't mind an update on where we are at with training core competencies for councillors in terms of tikanga Māori, and also an update in terms of what's going on with staff. And the other thing I'd like is something on the paralytic typhoid issue.
Neil's going to talk to that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Liz, there's a couple of minor items for you, I guess. Mike?
GPS assistance from the council.
GPS what?
System, GPS system.
Just put GPS, yeah.
You're on your phone, Mike.
Okay, I think that's going to keep us here till 4 o'clock. We will move on. Thank you very much. Now, we have the delegation from Central Hawke's Bay coming in at 11. And I guess they'll be on time. So we've got 3/4 an hour to get to that. So we will go straight to item 7. And who's taking us through that update? Tom. Thank you, Tom. Floor's yours, mate.
Thanks, Chair. This item is hopefully relatively self-explanatory. Previously, the team that are running Tank were anticipating and hoping that we'd be in a position by December to have a bunch of the science and associated work streams tidied away by the end of this year. But its most recent assessment has been that it's probably going to take a few meetings in the new year before we're in a position to pull together what we hope to be the draft plan to be then presented to Council in and around May of next year. So this paper really just sets out, points to the fact that we have an additional meeting. We have 2 meetings in October and a meeting in November that we hope to, in many respects, finalise a lot of the modelling for the science to help Tank members make some of their value decisions and assessments to then in the new year probably work iteratively around some of the outcomes of those decisions or recommendations from Tank to feed into some of the economic modelling and cultural and social assessment modelling that's going to be done. So happy to take any questions on the paper as it's written.
Thank you very much, Tom. Before we kick off, Tom, I hear that the Water Conservation Commission is dividing it up, the process up into 2 processes, the upper reaches and lower reaches. The lower reaches beginning next May, that's their recommendation. Does this have any influence on Tank? that decision?
Yeah, look, so it's a great question. Thanks, Chair. I actually have I've prepared a verbal report just to update on the WCO because it does relate to tank. And if you're happy for me to give that,
I'd like that now.
give that now.
Yeah.
And I just an abundance of caution, we've actually prepared. I've got a copy of it if anyone wants to raise their hand and see it. But it's just a one-pager. But you're correct in saying that late yesterday the tribunal gave its direction on how the water conservation order hearing is going to be sequenced and processed. Now, if we just step back for a second, going into the first hearing, Council had made a submission requesting that the hearing be split and that we hear that the tribunal heard the water conservation in respect of the upper first and gave the tank modelling time to be completed and finalised before hearing the lower. At the hearing itself, there were a number of variations and different scenarios of splitting, basically based on where that split would be and what would the basis of that split would be. We were all sent away to write more submissions, which we did, and Regional Council also provided some affidavit evidence just supporting our position. We effectively maintained our position, following a discussion here. Some parties requested to move the geographical split from Whanawhana up to the Ruahine Ranges. But to cut a long story short, the tribunal has come back. It said it will commence hearing for the water conservation order for the upper on the 14th of November, which and we're required to have our evidence in by the 27th of October. And then they've requested that before the end of January next year that we provide an update on how the tank science program is progressing so that they can then consider how timetabling for a hearing on the lower.
Chair.
And then Peter.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. So how explicit is this now? Is it then there'll be two conservation orders or some such thing that they'll explore the upper and determine, and then the lower? The reason I say that is, the upper looks likely, potentially, but the lower looks unlikely, potentially. If they split them, would one conservation order be the outcome, meaning that they may get no conservation order anywhere on the river? I haven't explained that well, but
so there's I'll try and answer that in two parts. I mean, the first part is that the tribunal has specifically acknowledged that this concept of the Whanawhana cableway remains arbitrary until all the evidence is heard, and so they're reserving the rights as to where, if an order is brought down, what value is it seeking to protect, and where is that value? So it could be. It's not an all or nothing. It comes down to the location of the values and the extent to which they require protection. But the second part of that response is that the tribunal has specifically acknowledged the fact that this is one water conservation order. It's one hearing. It's just been heard in two parts, and they'll make one decision.
Oh, is that right? That was a good question, in other words. Peter.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So now that the tribunal has made clear how it's going to proceed, I'd like to know what, if there is an order that's made only on the upper part of the Nararora finally, what implications that might have for our plan change, and also the fact that that part of the proceeding is now going ahead, what implication that might have for our resourcing of the tank process, given that we're now sort of being managed into, if you like, a deadline by the tribunal to have it done by May. Are you still confident that we can resource both of those things?
second part first. What the tribunal is looking for is the science out of tank. They've gone at great pains to say that the plan change process and the water conservation order are not combined or joined processes. They've said they're independent processes, and so it's definitely our hope that we and what we're working towards is that we get the substantive parts of the draft plan done by May. But what the tribunal's looking for is to have the hydrological modelling in a form that it can be sufficiently reviewed and tested so that it can inform the evidence and the discussions and around the water conservation order. So, in terms of resourcing, it certainly has. It is good for us the fact that they have made the split, and that we don't see our core science and hydrology team being dragged into or diverted into the water conservation order. There will be some call on staff, but it won't necessarily be the team that are working very hard to deliver that information to Tank.
Tom.
So there was a second part. There was a.
The implication if the WCO is made on the upper.
Yeah.
How that might fit with the plan change and what the implications are for us in managing them.
Well, so I mean, it is a sequencing thing, and it depends on how long it takes for the order to come, because the plan change does have to take into account and give effect to the water conservation order. It does have precedence. So if it depends how quickly who gets to the line first, I suppose. And if the water conservation order got to the line first, then the plan change would have to account for it. And but perhaps if the plan change was operative, then and the a water conservation order required it to be modified, then that's something we'd have to deal with.
Tom.
Given that the split has been made, I'm unclear as to what our position is with respect to the upper reach. I mean, arguably, we could put a statement out tomorrow that says we have no problem with a water conservation order on the upper reach. We consider the upper reach to be have outstanding natural values, and we're no longer particularly concerned with the outcome of that, and all of our resources are going into making the best putting forward the best plan change we can for the lower reaches. So what is our position on the upper part of this? Do we have one? Now that we have the opportunity to speak to it directly, our blanket position that we seem to be taking for legal posturing purposes was we want to have no bar of this water conservation order dastardly plot. But there it is in front of us. The issue has been divided. Are we prepared to move on and focus on what we ought to be focused on?
So I don't recall the words dastardly plot being a formal part of our submission.
I think he's referring to me.
So our position wasn't blanket in respect of the upper and the lower. It was, without having the submission in front of me here, in terms of the upper, it was, we tried to express it as very much in the form of conditional support. And really the position we took was that we would like to bring as much evidence to the table to support the tribunal in its decision-making process. But you're correct in saying that there was a degree, obviously, of I suppose of tactics and caution, because we didn't know how it was going to pan out. And so now that we understand what the process is going to be, we've got a conference call at 1:00 today with the core team to take that on board and figure out what our assessment is going forward. Having said that, though, there's I suppose, shared by many, a view that, a lot of people think there's a degree of common sense and around, the idea of a water conservation order in the upper, and so the follow on to that is this particular water conservation order the right water conservation order? And I think part of the challenge for us is understanding the extent to which the water conservation order has been pitched as a solution for the river in its entirety, or the extent to which the water conservation order reflects the constituency of applicants that are involved. And so part of the caution is making sure that we understand that the implications of finding, there being a determination of outstandingness of values that require protection in the upper, how far do they flow down further down the river? So
I understand that, but I guess what I'm getting at or trying to foreshadow is that if the regional council staff is contemplating taking a position that the upper reaches of the Narrow River do not have outstanding characteristics, and if we're going to advocate that position or contemplating advocating that position, I think that's a matter the council has to discuss.
I personally agree with that. This is a moving environment, and we need to, and our positions move as compromises may move, and I do think we do need the time to discuss that. I'm not sure whether we've got time to do it now, but it's such an important issue, perhaps we should get everyone's views, because it's entirely different having a conservation order on the upper, and various of us have different views on that, other than having a conservation order on the entire river. I don't know how people feel about that. Do you want to have a discussion about that?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Alan.
I've got a view, and that is that basically we should stick with our submission, keep our powder dry, and remember at the same time that there is a plan change in process for the Mohaka River as such, which substantially affects or would have an impact on the upper reaches, and the WCO may well be in conflict or compromise that planning process belonging to the regional council.
Thank you, Alan Torres.
Mr. Chairman.
As a co-chair, you need to speak now, mate.
In the upper reaches of the Ngarururu, there are lots of Māori land blocks up there, and if we are to consider like a division, I would like to see a meeting held with those incorporations and those hapu.
Mr. Chairman, I'll withdraw my comments in entirety. I'm getting mixed up about rivers.
Yes, Debbie.
Thank you. I agree with Chairman Toro. I think that when I signed on to be a councillor, I signed on to represent the whole region, and right at the outset of that catchment is Ngāmatea, who is severely impacted by this. So I think that we should be having that discussion with, like Toro said, all of those stakeholders in that area before we roll them out.
Anyone else have some thoughts on Api?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I too endorse the comments made by Chairman Waka, but also I want to express some concern around just sort of removing significant values from the upper regions without robust conversation, because we do have some significant matters which haven't been, some significant values which could do with better clarification rather than just sort of a removal from the whole process. So I just want to express my concern around removing any sort of values from the process without a robust conversation. Kia ora.
Paul?
Thank you, Chair. I mean, at the moment, it's just an idea. We haven't got any of the detail or any of the, as Tyra said, we haven't had the conversations with a whole bunch of people that we should do before we make a decision. But in principle, I'd be supportive of the idea of having a water conservation order on the upper reaches. But again, I can only say that and support that in principle because I don't know any of the details at the moment. So if you're looking for a steer, that would be my steer.
So I'd like to just talk to that. So the situation is that the Commission's come out only in the last 24 hours and said they want to split it, which makes a difference. And that's why people are saying, well, would they change their mind or would they take a different position? And Tom's point is, of course, that he would want to be absolutely driving, the council and the RPC should be driving what our staff are going to do here. So, and I think that's RP's position as well, that, this needs some serious discussion amongst us all here before, otherwise we just go home and our staff tomorrow, and they're under a tight deadline. That's the problem, Tom, isn't it? That there is actually this is a very sharp operation. This is not taking years, man. This is November. They're going for it. We won't meet before. So we do need people's views on this. Peter?
Thanks, Chair. So it seems to me that there's actually a couple of decisions that need to be made. The first is whether we would support the concept of a WCO in the upper reaches, and there's all sorts of different definitions around outstanding and what have you that need to be considered in relation to the current application and what it states. And the second part of it is if there was to be support for a WCO for the upper part of the river, is Whanawhana the correct place for it to start from, or should it be some other place that's further north from that? And right now the difficulty for all of us is that we don't have enough information to make a sensible decision and to give guidance to our staff on what our view should be. We do have some time here because the hearing is not to commence until 14th of November. So my suggestion is that we've got a Regional Planning Committee meeting on the 1st of November, that a report be brought back to us with recommendations that we can then consider and either agree with or change.
I think it's a very good suggestion. I'll just take Neil before I come back to you.
Just essentially a point of order around that suggestion from Councillor Bevan. We've got our
Chair.
We've got our RPC on the 1st of November, is that correct? Yes. When's our subsequent council meeting?
A special council meeting on the 15th of November.
And when's the date for submission?
27th of October.
Is that special council meeting to do with this issue?
To do with Maori constituencies.
Uh-huh.
So we're needing an answer or a consideration before the 27th of October, is that
So
correct?
I think Tom may have some suggestions for that.
So I think the first thing is just to just confirm that now that we are aware of the sequencing, there'll be a meeting, a teleconference meeting this afternoon to discuss this very point, and that out of that will probably come some information that will be useful for council or committee members. I do recall that we appointed a subcommittee prior to the lodging of the first submission that include councillors and tangata whenua members, and I'm just wondering whether that group might want to reconvene, to take an assessment of what we learn in the next few days, and then that can that committee could be used to inform staff of or report back to council or report back to the wider committee.
Api?
And I'll withdraw my comment. I think Tom's solution is elegant.
What do we? I agree with what Toro said about meeting some of the people who are in the upper, because they tend to be, they've been quite quiet in this. There is considerable landowners up there, not just Māori and corporations, but Maori or Ngāmatea is Māori freehold land, largest farm in New Zealand, in the North Island. So these are things which you have raised in the past, Peter, that that I think we do need to get our heads around the effects of the people, because I just don't want us to make a quick decision because it suits us and throw those people under the bus. So how do we handle that to meet those people?
Not hard to organise.
People
I think, you know, we're supposed to be doing business here, and we should not be We're supposed to be doing environmental business here, and we shouldn't be constrained by formalism. You know, you get the business done. If you have to meet, you meet. Now, I think the other thing is, you know, we need to be looking at these issues strategically as well. The world is changing, and even though, I mean, people are into this stock and dairy thing and all the rest of it, cows and whatever, there's more profitability in actually, like I went to the Chinese shop the other day and they're selling this little bottle of water for $4. Now, if you buy a pint of milk or whatever, it's about the same. Why aren't we just, and it takes whatever, what is it, 800, how many litres of water does it take to do a litre of milk? 1,000. Why are we just selling 1,000 litres of water? No, get rid of the cow. You know.
Okay.
We're all back to front at the moment.
But
I'm just strategically, those people up there, they've got the best water in the country. You know, it's good water, but also with us moving away from oil, we've got to look at what are the renewable energy issues, and I mean they could have little hydros up there, and water conservation ought to stop all that activity. You can't put a dam up. And the other thing is, you know, in the treaty we've got full exclusive protection of our fisheries and whatever, and this conservation order is driven by people who are into trout. That's all it's about, recreation. And they are impacting on my freshwater crayfish, because that's what they eat, and they're impacting on my whitebait, and I'm not very supportive of that. So, yeah, go on.
Thanks, Toto. Do we have any other? Yes, Tom.
Well, I think this just brings us back to there's not any apparent consensus at the moment as to what our position should be as far as the upper reach is concerned. And I guess all I'm trying to get at is that we need to have, we can't rely on our submissions to date at this point. The issue has been divided. We now will have to have a position in short order because they want to bring that entire process to a close before Christmas, basically. So I think Tom's suggestion is fine as one way of getting the appropriate involvement, but there are clearly folks upriver who probably are not comfortable with a water conservation order up there. There are others who, like Paul, probably myself, in principle, it seems like there are outstanding water qualities, but our staff has to come back and tell us we've weighed all of that. We've talked to the appropriate people who have interests up in the upper parts of the catchment. Here is a recommendation for council or the RPC to make a decision about. We need to get it all done by the third week of October, basically.
November. Yeah. No. Third week of October, not the third. Sorry. Okay, can I make this proposal that we get in contact with the major players on the upper reach, and we ask them to come down and have a meeting, and anyone who wants to turn up amongst us here can come and meet with them. I certainly will try my best to be here, just to hear what they've got to say. I mean, they've probably put submissions in, but I think Toro's dead right. It's much better if we get them in the room and say, what do you want to do? What do you think? How's this going to impact on you? So the actual people that live up there or own land up there. Is that a suggestion that people would like to be part of?
I'm always
can I
ready.
just- can I
I'm
just-
always ready for a talk, Chair.
Before I come to you, Neil, I'd just like a bit of a consensus on that, that we do that as a process just to get ourselves better informed on what they want to do and how they want to handle this. Peter, are you happy with that?
Well, just before, if I could
Yes.
contribute, Mr. Chair.
Neil?
Number one, if we're looking to have a meeting, I suggest we meet up there. But aside from that, I'd be interested to know the subsequent step, taking that feedback from stakeholders and then developing the appropriate submission as a result. And just if I could have a reminder of the dastardly few on this group of people from this council committee considering these issues. Can we just have a reminder of who those people are?
Yeah, no, yeah, that's right. The committee. Who is the committee? My one?
Correct, Chair. I believe it was yourself, Councillor Belford and Councillor Bevan, Liz, Peter, and Toto. Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
So at a minimum, we should meet them, shouldn't we? And anyone else who wants to come should meet them as well. That should be our first starter. Let's just meet them and have a chat.
I'd just ask a question, Chair. Is there any chance that we could get an extension on the submission we need to make to get it past the first so that this committee can have a look at it?
So the 27th of October is the last date for filing our evidence, and so it's not so much, and obviously that evidence needs to be pulled together by experts and they need to be commissioned shortly, and so the sooner we can do this, the better.
Follow-up question, Mr. Chair. Is there room for amendment subsequent to submission? So if we subsequently considered it on the next RPC meeting and we came up with some adjustments to it, could we file an amendment?
So are we talking about, we won't be talking about changing our evidence because our evidence will be, our expert evidence will be our expert evidence.
Can we add to the evidence then?
Well, the evidence is generally quite straightforward because it just goes to, do we believe these values are outstanding or not? So it's not, but what I'm hearing in terms of what is our position in respect of that evidence, and I suppose if I could just come back to my earlier comments, that we do have a position in respect of the APA. It is conditional, even though we have said that we oppose the making of the order. Our positioning in terms of the APA is that we want to be in a position to provide the best evidence that supports the tribunal. So it's not necessarily supporting the tribunal in not finding that features are outstanding, it's just providing the best evidence. And so just the only other point I'd make quickly is that just to remind ourselves that in this process we are one of many submitters. It's not our process, and so I understand the desire to get stakeholder feedback and engagement for our position, but on recollection, most of the people that we've discussed have submitted. They appeared at the first hearing. They have very strong positions and they'll be advocating for those positions direct to the tribunal, but that's for you to consider.
You know, I take that on board, Tom, and I mentioned that, but I personally want to talk to these people. And I'm certain most of the committee do too, and I'm certain also a lot of the people around this table do. We know, well, some of us know the guys on the Heratonga and the people on the Heratonga, and I've spent hours talking to them, and I haven't talked to anybody who's in the upper reach, and I'm very conscious of that. So I want to do that. So.
So, as part of my role, Mr. Chairman, and as Chairman of Hawke's Bay Māori Tourism, I've got a consortium of all those incorporations together to do a hunting and fishing thing. So
we'll do a bit of hunting
I
at the same
could
time.
I could help Liz pull them together pretty quickly.
Here we go again. First of all, our commitment to the tribunal is to put the best evidence to the tribunal so it can make its decision. So we're detached from the outcome, actually. We're just putting up the evidence. That involves, and the budget's been approved for us to appoint a project manager to go and get that evidence, to put it up. One of the things I think we need to make clear, a Māori landowner does not necessarily have the same view as tangata whenua. So just to put that on the radar, a Māori landowner and a Māori businessman who may well own land in the region doesn't necessarily have the same interest as tangata whenua. So that's the challenge for us in this process, and for all of us as a committee. It's about understanding those differences, those nuances, and our challenge as the Settlement Trust will be to get that, all positions in this evidence to present to the tribunal. But I want to make it clear, we're detached from the outcome. Whatever happens, whether it's granted or not, our job is to just make sure the evidence is on the table.
Mr. Chair, I'm still not, I'd like Tom to be very precise with this committee about the potential process in front of us. We go out, we get comment from stakeholders or discuss it with them. We prepare a submission that gets lodged on the 27th of October. Is that correct?
So we have prepared a submission. It was the very first submission we prepared.
We're in a position to modify that and make a fresh submission based on the upper reaches. Is that correct?
My understanding, and I'd need to confirm this, is that we can modify our position at any time. We can move from opposed to neutral or support.
Sure. Okay,
we can't go the other way.
So that's fine. So that's we are in a position to make those amendments, adjustments, offer new evidence, or even take a fixed position. That we're in that situation. Is that correct?
Yeah, I believe
Yes.
so. Yeah.
Okay. So we're in a position to do that. We make the amendment and adjustments. We submit on the 27th of October. My next question is there room for further adjustment or position taking by way of amendment after the 27th of October?
So I'll say this on the proviso that if I go away and find out I've got this wrong, I'll come back to you as quickly as I can. What we're doing on the 27th of October is filing our evidence. Now, we may, in the interim, at your direction, choose not to file evidence. And we may, at your direction, say, we're happy that the evidence that's been put together in the application is fine and is accurate and reflects the situation accurately, and also leads to the sort of outcomes that make sense in terms of the protections. And so we can at any time do that in the same way that the applicants probably could at any time change or pull or modify their position.
So there is this opportunity for the entire committee here to consider the deliberations of the next few weeks on the 1st of November, come to a position and make a subsequent amendment if it so chose. Is that what's possible here?
Yeah, look, I believe that it's possible. Obviously, we need to be getting our evidence in shape and underway, and so we'll be coming back to you, or the subcommittee, in very short order with setting out what we propose to do in terms of commissioning the evidence and effectively what's, I suppose, called the case theory. What's the type of case that we're going to proposing to run here?
Mr. Chairman, is there not a problem when we talk about we, in that the submission is a regional council submission, and I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, people, that in effect the Maori caucus of this committee has its own position, which is different.
That is true. Not true?
All right. Correct me then.
No, that's not quite right.
Okay.
I think we're actually more agreed than seems to be, than is seen. We took a neutral position just to get the evidence onto the tribunal table. And I think where we disagreed on that fabulous meeting on the 22nd was just the tone of the, we said, let's not oppose it, let's just put a neutral one, and the council chose to put in a submission in opposition. We were just saying, let's take a neutral. I don't know that we're that that far apart.
All right.
The councillor is correct. There is not currently a RPC submission.
There is not.
There is a regional
That's the
council submission, and that's what's in front of the tribunal at this point.
And so just to, Councillor Curtin, I apologise if I haven't communicated this well. My understanding is that our legal representatives can stand up at the tribunal and at any time and say, this is our position. And so if it changes at the behest of council, in the interim, then acting on our instructions, that's probably what they'd have to do.
Okay, I'm going to move this along because this turned into, we actually have a update. Our recommendation is that we receive the update on tank, and of course we got involved in WCO. So do I have a mover to receive this report, please? Paul?
Just one question, which is, I think, quite an important one. Paragraph 7 on page 22 says the consent team is considering how best to manage the new consent applications. Is that something that will be done entirely at staff level, or will it be reported to this committee or otherwise to council? I mean, it's a serious issue.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, it will be something that will be developed at staff level but come back to council.
And approximately when?
I can't answer that. No, I can't give you a guaranteed answer, but it'll be within the next few months.
Thank you.
Mover, do you want to, you move, Paul, did you? And a seconder, Tom? Oh, no, Joanna, we'll do like that. Do you wish to speak, Paul? Joanna? Anyone else wish to speak? Okay, all those in favour? Oh, you do, RP, sorry. Just put me off with his glasses, mate.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, Mr. Chair. Tom mentioned earlier on that some submissions have been made to the hearing and some amendments. Will the subcommittee be receiving the subsequent submissions and changes presented to the hearing?
In terms of council submissions?
Yeah, so we originally put in the Hawke's Bay Regional Council submission to the WCO, and throughout the process there's been further submissions and further evidence put forward. Is there a summary of that of those submissions and that evidence being provided to the subcommittee or the RPC at some stage?
Look, so that's an excellent point, and so I'll make sure that those submissions are publicly available, but I'll make sure that they are circulated. But just to be clear, so we filed our original submission. We are following up on an invitation from the tribunal. We filed a subsequent submission requesting that the hearing be split. So that was effectively a process submission. Then the third, and then when they called for all parties' positions on that, we just filed another supporting submission on that. So we haven't changed. Our original submission at this stage.
Okay, thank you. All those in favour? Receiving the report, aye, and against. Thank you very much. Before we, just a point of clarification, we will understand exactly what Liz's comments are, that landowners aren't the only people who have rights here, and that's the same as on the lower reaches. I mean, the people who live in our towns and villages have just as much right to have a really lovely river as do the people who own the land by the rivers and use the rivers. So I get your point very clearly, but nevertheless there's some of us would like to meet those landowners, and we will proceed with that and let everyone know the date, and as many as you can get along. I think that would be a valuable experience for us. So thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, could I just ask this question as to whether the subsequent submission is in fact an RPC submission or a council submission.
We are stuck with the council one, I think.
But I would suggest, Chair, that doesn't preclude us from having that discussion at RPC.
No. But we're all in a process, which is Liz also pointed out now, that it's quite difficult to get out of. Okay, all those in favour, we got that, accepting that, didn't we? Yep, right. Item 6, I'd like to welcome Central Hawke's Bay community down, especially you, Alex. I'm not sure, you're going to present to us, are you? Or we have a paper here as well. Yeah, I think, come up and sit here, Alex. We love to have you around our table. You add a whole lot of things. Youth, beauty, everything. But before we start, Tom will talk to the paper which we have before us before we ask a presentation from you.
Thanks, Chair. And look, and before we hand over to our guests from Central Hawke's Bay, I just want to just quickly make a few points about the paper in front of you, because effectively it draws from a paper that was provided on the 22nd of August, honing in specifically on the issues of the minimum flows. But I think it's important to not to overcomplicate, for the benefit of our guests, not overcomplicate the message that I believe that they're here to deliver. So if we just quickly back up, we at the 22nd of August we flagged to this committee that we will be bringing in the near future, and that is intended to be on the 1st of November, a range of recommendations around what a bunch of minor and technical fixes to PC6 might look like. At the discussion we had on the 22nd, it was also flagged that one of the matters we may bring to you is a discussion around the timing of the introduction of the new minimum flow regime for Plan Change 6, and that's I believe is going to be a substantive part of the discussion here. And so the issue really that we're focusing on stems from the very the difficult and protracted birth of Plan Change 6. And it was a plan that envisaged giving water users, sufficient time to adopt to the new flow regimes, and it was, hoped to be a period of about 4 to 5 years. By the time the plan had actually been through the Board of Inquiry, through the courts, the time to adapt was less than 3 years, and obviously coupled with this was the presence and the opportunity around the Ruataniwha Water Storage Project. And so by the time we received the decision in July of this year from the Supreme Court that effectively brought the Ruataniwha to its current state, many of the water users in Central Hawke's Bay had signed up for the dam, and so in some respects they have less than 11 months to get their heads around the new flow regime. So obviously, so the discussion here is, I suppose, effectively to speak to the case for delaying the minimum flows, and in terms of the decision-making process, that will help inform, possibly inform what's put in front of you on the 1st of November. Is that clear?
Any questions for Tom?
Just a point of order, Chair. How long are you expecting this presentation to take? Because if it's over, I think it's 10 minutes under standing orders, you have to ask the approval of we'll make that announcement.
Well, I'm going to ask that right now, Councillor, because I am certainly not going to cut these people off in 10 minutes. Is everyone happy here that it's this? I would have thought it's an agenda item. So let's just move on from that. Tom, did you have a question? You'll wait. Okay. If we And once again, welcome to you as well. We'll hand the floor over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Tom, for the introduction. My name is Alex Walker, and for those of you that I haven't met, I'm the Mayor of Central Hawke's Bay. Thank you very much for having us here today to speak to the Regional Planning Committee on a very topical issue for us in Central Hawke's Bay, but trying to paint a picture that's actually this is topical for the whole region. I'm joined by Greg Mills, who is a member of the Ruataniwha Water User Group and is the Managing Director of a significant farming business in Central Hawke's Bay, as well as other members of the Ruataniwha Water Users Group who are here as well. Welcome, gentlemen. I thought I'd start by explaining why it's me here, representing the community, but on behalf of the Ruataniwha Water Users Group. And it goes back to a conversation that I had with the chair of that group, Duncan Holden, who's here today. And he called me and he said, we need to talk about Plan Change 6 and what this is going to mean in Central Hawke's Bay. And to follow on from Tom's words about keeping it simple, I'm going to keep it very simple. So we talk about Plan Change 6, or the Tukitoki Plan, has two facets to it really, about quality of the water in our catchment and quantity of water in our catchment. And it was particularly around the issue of quantity that Duncan wanted to have a conversation, because there's lots of information around about what these minimum flows in the plan change mean and the impacts of them. And in fact, as recently as the Palmer report, the Ruataniwha review that was tabled earlier this year, there is information like up to 122 days of potential water bans in these zones across the Tukitoki catchment. 55% likelihood of bans in any one particular year. 24 years and 40 where there could be a string of at least 10 days where there is water bans in this catchment. And also this particular figure which was covered in the Ruataniwha review about what is the economic impact of these minimum flows. And the numbers that came from that report are about 35% reduction in cash farm surplus. And that's all very well, but the conversation that Duncan and I had was actually what is the flow, what does that actually mean for us in Central Hawke's Bay and across the wider Hawke's Bay region? Because those numbers don't really mean anything very real to us as we sit here at this table or at any table discussing this issue. And it is about the flow-on effect of what cash farm surplus means across the whole community, across our businesses, the direct flow into those businesses and into employment and other things happening in the district. So our region, Central Hawke's Bay, contributes at least a quarter of the exports that go out of the region, out of the port. We have a GDP which is significantly driven by agriculture from our district, and it significantly drives employment in our district. Close to 30% of our workforce in Central Hawke's Bay are directly employed in agriculture. So this is agriculture really drives what happens in our community. So that's why I came to help put this picture across about what these minimum flows mean for the community. And coming back to this very simple concept of what the plan change means around quality of water and quantity of water. And this is the nub. The first action point for compliance in both of these areas happens in May 2018, which is only a handful of months away. And this is really the pinch point, and this is why we're here talking to you, because this timing is the pinch point for us here. And knowing that in the conversation that was had around this plan change, that Ruataniwha Water Storage Scheme was fairly pivotal to that, and in a lot of the conversations about quantity of water, obviously Ruataniwha played a really significant role. So to be clear, we're not here to talk about Ruataniwha. We're here to talk about water quantity, not about Ruataniwha. And the solution to this pinch point is about time, because actually the conversation that happened alongside the plan change about Ruataniwha has delayed the important conversations that needed to happen around how to resolve the quantity issues when it comes to water. And this, we're suggesting here today that time is what we need to be able to comply with this quantity issue. We need the time to collaborate. Obviously there is some collaboration already happening because I'm standing here with users of a water user group within the district. But we also need some time to add some innovation into that collaboration. In that paper you've got in front of you from Tom, it actually talks about some of the options under the plan change around provision of extra water. Those may be good options, but we actually need some time to work through those and other options to how this could be dealt with. And finally, there is the most significant part of that, is that if we're going to create solutions for this pinch point, there is investment required. And that's investment that our landowners and our water users are absolutely ready to make on the right things. So this is about time to make the right decisions. So the suggestion, the point of today, is that quality and quantity, we're not talking about Ruataniwha, that's off the table, but our number one priority has to be about water quality. And this reiterates what has come through in the Board of Inquiry and also in the Ruataniwha review, that quality is the main point. So we currently have process and significant investment across this catchment in farm environment management plans, nutrient budgets, and the subsequent changes to land use and changes to systems that will be required to meet those quality outcomes. And that's the bit that we need to focus on is this date of May 2018, where the first step of minimum flows come into the catchment, and that's what we want to focus on today. Just to be clear, I wanted to put this picture up here of what the Tukituki catchment looks like. And I'm not sure if you'll be able to see from there, but in the top right-hand corner is Hastings City. So the main part of the catchment is in the Central Hawke's Bay district, but there is a significant corridor that runs along the lower Tukituki through the coastal side of the Hastings district as well. So this is not just a Central Hawke's Bay district issue, this is an issue that spreads into the further parts of Hawke's Bay as well. But we are here presenting information and some perspectives from Central Hawke's Bay's direction. So in the paper in front of you that we have provided, what we wanted to do was give you some real numbers about what this economic impact will mean for our community about these changing flows. So we have gathered some case studies to give you some particular figures about this, because we know that managing water quantity is driving economic conversations across the whole bay. There's a whole lot of things that you guys have got on your table at the moment, and it's important for us to understand the direct consequences of that. So I'm going to get Greg to take the lead now, and he's going to just quickly step through these case studies and highlight the key information from those. Greg.
Thanks, Alex, and appreciate the opportunity to address the committee and I guess outline the potential impacts and implications, not only for us as water users, but also for, I guess, a wide range of other businesses and organisations in the community. So we certainly see this as, I guess, a community challenge, and I think, as Alex framed up, we certainly want to collaborate with those key stakeholders to find the best path forward. I guess just before I jump into very quickly summarising the case studies, there's probably just a couple of key points around use of water and band days and how those impact. So I guess the first point is that the whole concept of irrigation is based on maintaining soil moisture. It's not based on improving soil moisture. And why that's important is that typically when we have band days, they are generally consecutive. So you don't get individual band days scattered through the year. Quite often they will come in a sequence of 5, 7 or 10 days. And so what that does is it reduces soil moisture, and then when irrigation starts again, we're maintaining soil moisture at a lower level. So band days and consecutive band days are quite significant in terms of the impact they have on production of crops and pasture and the consequential, I guess, economic impact of that. And I think as the data has been presented, it shows that with the Plan Change 6 lift in minimum flows, then both the number of band days and the likely consecutive band days will increase significantly, and hence the impact. So in terms of the first case study, I guess very quickly, is a pasture-based farming system, and in terms of the projections under Plan Change 6, the most likely, most severe situation would involve 110 days of inability to access water. The impact on this business is about $280,000 in terms of that worst case scenario. An average year involves 10 days, which is an impact of $77,000 a year. And just to give you some context, a typical pasture-based farming system, that number would be about the same or slightly higher than the typical cash surplus or profit that you would expect from a business like this. So the implication for this business is, without the replacement of the 200,000 litres of water that this business committed to take from Ruataniwha, this business is potentially unsustainable financially. So in terms of the case study 2, this is I guess is a large-scale farming business. So just to give you some context in terms of large scale, it employs 67 people. It spends roughly $10 million with local businesses in the community. So not only is it a significant employer, it's a significant spender with local businesses in the community. So the slide that Alex put up previously, this business would spend significant amounts of money with most of those businesses on a weekly, monthly basis. And so this business committed to take 4 million cubic metres of water from Ruataniwha. So the implication for this business of Plan Change 6 and Ruataniwha not being in place is effectively a profit or income reduction impact of $800,000 a year. So this business currently employs 6 staff. Without access to 4 million cubic metres of water, effectively this business as a dairy farm is no longer viable. It would be converted back to dry stock, and it would employ 1 person. So, and its spend in terms of what it would spend with local businesses to operate the farm would reduce by nearly $900,000 a year. So, and the 5 staff or 6 staff that currently work on this business have 8 kids that are currently in schools. So I think it's bigger than just, hey, this business has a profit impact. There's a far wider impact with the community, and so I think it's about focusing on, I guess, all of the stakeholders that are potentially impacted by this change. And I guess, given my involvement with this business, it has chosen to, source water from Ruataniwha, and so has not, made or progressed alternative arrangements to secure that water. So right now, there is no viable or feasible solution to source 4 million cubic metres of water by June 2018 for this business. In terms of case study 3, this is an irrigated, arable and cropping-based business, and I think probably the key point with this business is distinguishing it from dairy is that they grow crops and animals in a sheep and beef finishing arrangement, which often takes 12 to 18 months to achieve. So the impact on this business of increased minimum flows on year to year. So it's it's quite a significant impact in terms of a multi-year impact. In terms of case study 4, I might talk about the farming part, and then you might sort of pick up the off-farm part of it. In that, this particular case study both has a farming operation as well as a commercial butchery associated with it. So it kind of bridges both aspects of the community that are impacted, and so they've developed a farm system which is very much focused around value add, producing high quality products, and they've taken it that next step by investing into processing and marketing beyond the farm gate, and so that business is very much integrated, and the impact for them is they would no longer be able to produce the high quality and specification of finished livestock to support their investment in processing and marketing beyond the farm gate.
And I think that the point with this being linked to a retail business is it's about continuity of supply, and so security of water is quite directly linked for this business and for others. Actually, in the next one I'll talk about where that continuity of production so they can supply is quite crucial. These guys are growing really quickly in this retail scope, and the impact here is at least on 5 staff and probably on their potential growth for that business. And I just want to add another couple of facts about not a farming business but a processing business which exists in Waipukurau. There's no details in your paper, but this business uses water in the cooling and processing of meat products in the township of Waipukurau. They employ 14 locals in this processing plant, and they're supplying products to retail contracts where they can cope with maybe 3 days of disruption to their supply, but anything longer than that has long-term impacts on those supply contracts into the retail outlet. And they've done some analysis that showed that if they applied the Plan Change 6 limits to the past 18 years of water supply, that only 6 of those last 18 years would actually be sustainable for them. And you can see that here on this chart where the green boxes on those years show the years which have had adequate water supplies, that would have, under the new water flows. I'll make this table available to you after. So this comes back to the point of why we're here, is that these businesses have the flow on of economic impact across the whole community in terms of employment and ongoing GDP. And the security of water supply adds to that security of the economy, and we really need some time, and that's why we're here, is asking for this assistance in this area so that we can get through this process, so that we can get to that investment on what is appropriate. It could be that there is global consent process that could be used similar to what's used in Twyford. It could be that there is common ground between neighbouring farms where they can work on water storage together. There is the options which have been laid out on your paper, but these things need some time, which we haven't been able to have alongside the conversations about quality. So coming back to this really simple point, that there is 2 really important things happening here in this plan change, and because of how the timing of this is rolled out with the conversations about water storage, we have this pinch point of May 2018. In 2020, in the quality space, we could have as many as 300 farms who are having to go through a resource consenting process as well. So the investment and the financial outlay for these businesses is potentially huge. So we need to be focusing on getting one right so that we can then pull the other one along in line with it.
I guess just in terms of some supporting comments around that is, I guess my observation in terms of working with a wide range of businesses all up and down the North Island is that, I guess in terms of water users and primary producers, my observation is that, I guess green primary production businesses are generally have a black financial position. So the most environmentally sustainable farming businesses generally tend to be highly profitable businesses choosing to reinvest profits into technologies and solutions to mitigate environmental impact. So I think there is a connection between the water quantity issue and the water quality issue. So if the water quantity issue has a significant impact on profitability, there's a consequential impact in reduction of profits and available surpluses to reinvest around water quality.
Thank you, that's a really good point. So that brings us to the conclusion of the information we wanted to get across to you today. So the point being, we're looking for your support with this plan, the Tuki plan, to look at can we find a way to push these dates out on the implementation of the low flows. This is crucial for the health and the viability of our community. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Alex, for your presentation, and thank you very much as well. It was a very good presentation. Before we go, because I'm sure there'll be lots of questions, I have two questions, one for you and then one for Tom. You've obviously done a lot of work on this. Have you got a feeling for how much time you need?
I would like to say that I think it's probably at least in the scope of 5 years, because there is pretty much been a hiatus in the conversation about water quantity of about 5 years of Ruataniwha. And so I would hazard a guess that that is what's required. There are some potential significant system changes required on how this land is used and how they're dealing with water. And we need to focus on the farm environment management plans and the quality stuff which is happening right now, and the group is absolutely committed to. We absolutely understand that, and so I think that timing is important.
And I guess just to kind of break that into some components. I mean, effectively, I guess identification and evaluation of options. You're talking sort of 12 months or so. That will then, distill down to, I guess, a preferred course of action. Then taking that, designing it. You're talking about another 6 to 12 months. Then taking that through potentially a planning and consent process, and then construction to have water. You kind of add those chunks of 6 to 12 months together, and you relatively quickly get to 3.5 to 4 years to get through identification, evaluation, planning, consent, approval, and then construction. So, if you chunk that down much less than 5 years, then it's going to be incredibly difficult to achieve solutions in significantly less than that time frame.
Thank you. And just to create the platform for questions and discussions, Tom, given that answer and given the request and given that we are now in a legal process in the plan change, is that a possibility? Are we even able to do that or able to talk about the time issue?
Yeah, I believe we are. So there's a number of ways, and I suppose this will be part of the paper that comes to you on the 1st of November, is that we could be pushing both dates out, because there's a first step and a second step date, so we could be pushing both dates out, or perhaps another option is to just miss out the interim step date and go to the full date out in 5 years.
To answer the question is, we are legally able to acquiesce to a request such as this? Yes or no? Yes. Being that there'll be discussions on timeframes and.
Yeah, so I mean, this is effectively would it be a plan change to amend that rule?
Okay, thank you. All right, questions for everybody. Tom, questions first, and before we have.
Just to continue with that, so any change of that nature would be in the context of a plan change. It would be a publicly notified plan change. Parts of the community that have not been invited to speak to this committee would have reservations about extending those deadlines. It would be incumbent upon us, I would think, before proposing any, to hear from those other parts of the community, and not just 40 irrigators. So this will go well beyond the technical amendment brief that the staff has been given, and so I would suppose that we would have a process in mind that would educate us about what other considerations might be involved. Your memo, Tom, point 14 describes 4 or 5 other mitigation opportunities, and I would think we'd need some information as to how far might those go or not go in terms of individual irrigators being able to deal with their unique problems in each property, so to speak. I mean, it seems to me that this is going to open a significant issue, It's not going to be uncontentious, and I think we need to hear all sides of the argument.
Tom?
If I could just...
No, I don't think it was a question.
It wasn't a question.
It was Tom's. Sorry.
It would be helpful to hear from Tom because he'll discuss the stakeholder engagement side of things.
Do you want to be heard, Tom? Come on, off you go. Press the button.
Only if there's an audience.
Rick's looking at you strangely.
So in terms of the stakeholder engagement point that Councillor Belford raised, it's my intention that some preliminary discussions in that respect and with some of those key stakeholders will happen in advance of the paper coming to you on the 1st of November, so that we could give you an indication of how contentious this might be to help you form your view. In terms of the mitigations that you've identified, yep, absolutely, they're there. But I think the point of the presentation here is more about the time to get your head around the mitigations.
Thank you, Neil.
Yes, thank you, Alex, and thank you for the analysis. Just a couple of questions in regard to some of those outstanding consequential loss figures that you presented in the scenario. I'm highly taken with 800,000 per annum for one large-scale business. You also mentioned the potential for those businesses to combine and, for example, look at water storage. Has there been any analysis, or are there any other potential scheme opportunities or water storage opportunities that have been analysed by particularly those that, if they're looking to lose 800,000 a year, could be investing in some sort of water storage?
I guess I can only really speak specifically for the business that I'm involved with, which is was one of the largest business, or I guess water users for Ruataniwha, and the decision that the business took was that I guess on the basis of the ownership of the Ruataniwha project, being the regional council, was to commit to that project and not to I guess progress the development of our own project, and the reason for that is I guess is purely financial. I mean, the investment required on very preliminary sort of scoping and investigation, you're potentially talking somewhere in the order of between $50,000 and $100,000 of investment required in consultants and engineers to even do a very preliminary scoping around building your own reservoir of the scale that we would require. So the business, I guess, backed Ruataniwha as a solution, and so I guess the simple answer to your question is no, we do not have currently today an alternative solution other than some ideas that were kind of brainstormed at our last board meeting. So kind of coming back to the question earlier around time frame, those ideas, given that we're talking, for our business, we're talking about a reservoir to store somewhere in the order of 4 to 4.5 million cubic metres of water, so that's not a little dam, that's quite a large one. That project, to scope it out, you're talking potentially 6 months of investigative work, potentially another 6 months of kind of engineering design, site assessment, those kind of things. So quite a time heavy and financially heavy investment required to progress it.
Is there scope, sorry Mr Chair, is there scope though for your group to submit to this council in terms of in some way supporting that sort of development?
I guess generally speaking, primary producers, my assessment of them, they're a pretty resourceful bunch of people, and so I would envisage that there are quite a number of potential solutions there. Are there any that are very obvious today? No, and largely because the water users had committed to Ruataniwha. So yes, I believe that there are potential solutions that could be developed, but there aren't any very obvious ones that are kind of sitting there in front of us, sort of ready to go today.
And I think possibly the other point, Councillor, is that there are some properties that are already in the process of creating their own on-farm storage, but there is a number of properties where creating a dam to store water actually just isn't even feasible because of the lay of their land. And so actually some of the more pertinent conversations are going to be with them, with their neighbouring properties, with others that have maybe got the landscapes that would be able to hold on farm storage or some other capacity. They may have a deep water bore that could share some water. So there's that kind of thinking, collaborative thinking amongst neighbours that is important.
And I guess just to add to that too is potentially I guess there's an option of water users all going and developing individual solutions that kind of meet minimum requirements or can be consented, and then potentially there might be a better solution that involves collaboration where it might take longer to achieve but would potentially produce I guess a better, more sustainable, both financially and environmental solution from water users coming together in small groups to design a better resourced solution. And again, that process takes time for people to come together and I guess tease out options and ideas around that. I guess my view is that that process of more time, we are more likely to get a better solution rather than a fast solution.
Yes, I had a quick call around to Tamatea Taiwhenua, which involves 9 marae, and the initial consensus is support for the recommendations from the two up the top there, and we'll be discussing it fully at our meeting on the 17th. And as I said, Tamatea represents 9 marae, and I'm just mindful of the consideration that tangata whenua delegates had when Kohu Pāraki were supporting the water conservation order. One of the reasons that Tamatea supported the Ruataniwha Dam concept was they believed that Plan Change 6 would mitigate the effects of the dam. So the current water conservation debate that's being held, particularly in the Heretaunga area, one of the emphasis in driving past this morning is there's all these hoardings about loss of jobs. Well, that may happen, but if this goes ahead in Plan Change 6 in Central Hawke's Bay, that will happen from not next May, probably next summer. It will kick in. And the first ones to feel the pinch is going to be our people, because we're at the bottom of the food chain. Freezing Works and those jugs there, a couple of my nephews are leaning on the tractor there, holding the tractor up. They're the first ones to lose the jobs. So what they're saying in the water conservation thing for Hastings, through the Ngaruroro, this is going to happen down our end. And we're already losing most of our people down and going over to Australia. You can fire a shotgun in the pub now and only hit me and the missus. So, you know, we're fully in support of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question for Tom. I'm trying to get my head around paragraph 4 and subsequently paragraph 14.4, where you talk about the number of consents that to take surface water, and that's it's been 100 consents to take surface water. Yet in 14.1, there's only 12 of these that are classified as direct. 40 of them are in a high stream depleters and 4 take minimum stream depleters. So that leaves about 40 odd that are floating around that whilst they've got consent to take surface water, that doesn't appear to be under any constraint in terms of ceasing at minimum flows. I'm just trying to get my head around that particular issue.
So with your leave, councillor, it would be probably better for me to go and find that information and fill that gap in for you.
Okay, that's fine, because what it strikes me, the way that this is written, is that this whole issue actually only affects perhaps 52 consent holders, because they're the only ones that have to be subject to ceasing or having half their daily take taken at minimum flow levels.
Yeah, so are you happy for me to follow up
Yep.
with that information?
Okay, and then another question, Tom, paragraph 13, well, I don't know whether this is a question for you necessarily, but there was, when the water resource consents have been replaced in 2013, there were minimum flow conditions put into those resource consents then. So one would assume that some sort of planning had been undertaken by those consent holders to deal with the minimum flow conditions in those consents, because you also state they remain largely the same as in the operative version of Plan Change 6.
Look, I may call on Mr. Miller in the background if I get this wrong, but I imagine what the consent conditions, they effectively foreshadowed the fact that there could be some new consent conditions in Plan Change 6, and so I'm not sure of the exact wording of those conditions, and perhaps they just reflect that the new conditions shall give effect to whatever comes out of the plan change.
Yeah. Okay, because to me, thanks for that, but to me, the issue there is around this whole thing of, I'm sympathetic to the notion of delaying the 2018, but I don't know whether I'm sympathetic to it being 5 years, that's all. And I think, there's been fair warning back in 2013 that this was an issue that was going to raise its ugly head. So I suppose my next question would be to the water user group. In your conclusions, and thanks for your conclusions, I'm really interested in finding solutions. I understand there's a whole bunch of issues that it's going to come bite in the rear end, but the solutions I'm interested in. In your second paragraph, you talk about the user groups have been proactive in seeking solutions to irrigated water security, with over half its members contracting to the RWSS. The other chunk of them that didn't contract to the RWSS, are they solutions that could be looked at for everyone else, or?
Can I just maybe make a comment on that? That part of the water users group will be people that hold deep water bores. They're not surface water takers.
Yeah.
As part of that.
Okay, it's all right. And then the only other comment I would make, following on from that, is around one of the potential solutions, which is the 14.2, which talks about obviously that's taking water out of the river for all the out of surface water for storage, and that so far about a quarter of it's been allocated. Would you consider? I mean, that's been allocated obviously on a first come first served basis. Would you think it'd be a worthwhile idea if we sat there and considered about actually not doing it on first come first served basis, but looking at what's the benefit of the whole community down there in terms of who actually gets the water that particular location, because they don't want it to be like a gold rush.
I think that's potentially where we're getting to then, is looking at a kind of global consent kind of framework that like we see in Twyford. And we know that takes time to get those heads around the table and work that through, and I can't see why that would not be an option to be discussed and considered. I think pretty much at the moment all options are on the table, so that we can get that process and get that right decision making to happen.
And I guess just to go back or to use one of your initial points, Mr. Chair. You as a council have the choice and power and decision around what you choose to do around considering the request to defer and what that time frame is, and your decisions around that will determine whether you as a council want a fast solution or the best solution. Now, it's not my place to tell you which of those you want, but that's the choice you have. If you want to shrink the time frame, we'll find a solution, all right, but it will be a fast solution. It may not be the best solution, and so your deliberations as a council and a determination of acquiescence or not to this request and the time frame that you set will determine whether, I guess, your message to us as to whether you want a best solution or a fast solution, and that's your choice.
So just to follow up from that, you're conscious, of course, that we were due to have a paper back at the next RPC meeting in November. What sort of time frame would you expect to? Would you prefer for us to be looking at coming with some indications where we sit?
Yeah, and I think the indication that Alex gave, I think, is a time frame that will achieve the best solution, because that will provide an appropriate amount of time to consult with stakeholders, and because solutions that involve collaboration between stakeholders, that process takes time, and collaboration between stakeholders, in my personal opinion, is most likely to lead to the best solution. So if we want collaboration and people working together, that takes time, and so therefore, hence, that's what leads into suggesting that a 5-year deferral provides an appropriate amount of time, rather than everybody sitting around the table feeling like they've got a shotgun to their head, which was we have to decide tonight what we're doing. That's where we'll get into a fast solution, which may not be, the best outcome from an environmental point of view, or for the community, or financially.
Kia ora. There's a wide range of views around this table, and every view is important. And so, from my perspective, I put more weighting on the health of the environment than I do on the wealth of the people. So, what that requires is, the challenge is we have to find a compromise, I suppose, between those people who want more money and those who want cleaner water. And I'll just take you into one of the recent issues in the paper about the 10 people who are in hospital because of the typhoid issue. Now, the news media, they're blaming the people for going to get the kaimona. But a lot of those people that go to get it, they're poor people. They go to get it to eat. So the emphasis the real issue should be is why is that water in that condition? Not that the people were hungry and went and got it. So what I'm saying is that there's a dual responsibility here. We as regional council, our job is to make sure that there's environmental sustainability, and that the users at the top of the tuki consider the interests of the people at the bottom of the tuki. We'd love to help, and I'm sure we'll find a way to do it. But you guys are going to have to make some compromises, and should not rely, like I'm a businessman, I don't rely on the council to subsidise my business, and nor should you. Got it.
Tom?
Well, I'd just like to pursue that point. I think that's a very well-stated point, that a 5-year delay for Central Hawke's Bay farmers to implement this sits on top of a 10-year wait for Central Hawke's Bay to get on top of its sewage disposal into the Tuki River, which you had to declare earlier this week has been a total flop, and you're back to ground zero on solving that problem. So you're asking for this delay in a bigger context here of, okay, so what is the other side of the coin? What are you prepared to put on the table in terms of getting your act together on the environmental aspects of what this plan change requires? We see a very slow process of farm environmental management plans coming forward, as a for instance, and what expectation might we have as to how those will be accelerated if there's a time commitment made here to extend the planning for your commercial purposes.
Can I make a comment on that?
You
Mr.
certainly
Chair?
can.
I just want to come back to this very simple slide that I put up here, Councillor, where there's two parts to this Tuki plan, and based around quality and quantity. And what part of the message we're trying to affirm to you here is that we're 100% committed to meeting the requirements that are coming around quality. And the process around farm environment management plans and the other commitments we have to the quality of the water including our urban wastewater supply, are absolutely paramount to all of us. We absolutely understand that. And so what we're saying is that we remain committed to that, but looking for some support on the other side of this on quantity so we can get the quality part right. And I'm sitting at a council table in Central Hawke's Bay, which is close to a year into its straps, and we have made treatment of wastewater an absolute priority. And part of, I think, what you're referring to this week is the direction from governance at our table that we have to get this right. And we're absolutely committed to that, which is why we are presenting this picture of we're committed to quality. We need some support on the quantity. So we're absolutely committed to that.
And I guess just, to probably support that message, I mean, the business that I'm involved with so far this financial year, and so for the farm business, a financial year is 1st of June to 31st of May. So far, we've invested over $60,000 into consultancy and advice around the farm environmental management plan process, around establishing our current benchmarks and starting to develop and explore management system solutions. So I guess I'm a very firm believer in, I made the comment earlier around green primary producing businesses are black businesses. So, our business can and will continue to invest into quality and environmental mitigation efforts whilst we have the profits able to do that. So,
if I could interrupt you just on that point, some of us believe that green businesses produce black.
Yeah, you can argue the chicken and the egg, I guess.
Neil, have you got it? We actually have a paper which we need to remove to receive, and but I'm still and so this presentation is actually separate to that paper, although it's hooked to it. I'm interested to know whether there's well, I'm interested to know the general thinking around the table, because one thing for certain, there are a couple of things for certain. This will, we've been told, this will require a plan change to do this. So that is very much in the rules of this committee. That is very much our kaupapa. So we do need to get our heads around this, because plan change will require broad collaboration with a whole lot of other people. It will be contested. It will be, whatever our position is going forward on this, it will be a battle. So I would like us to get our ducks in a line on what we're going to do here. And so I haven't said my personal view, and so I will do now. This community is really important to us as a whole. They got in behind a project which everyone knows I opposed from the very beginning, but they got fully in behind it, and I thought, well done to them. I got fully against it, and there's no hard feelings about that. But they didn't look at the options. Of course they didn't. They thought they were going to win. They thought they were going to win. So you didn't look at the options. And a lot of foolishness was associated with this in terms of running these two things together. It was high-risk strategy, and now we find ourselves here. But nevertheless, we do find ourselves here, and it is my view that this community needs time to re-look at the situation, because, as I have stated from the very beginning, water storage, we need water storage. I just didn't like the plan that you had in front of us. But we do need to look. We've got global warming, we've got jobs, economy, we've got to improve our rivers and streams, and water storage and innovation, I noticed that was up there, around water is going to be paramount as we go forward. So I'm a very strong supporter of giving time and going into battle on that, because we will be going into battle on that, and we shouldn't underestimate that. So that's just my personal view. Everyone around here has to be very, and perhaps we need to workshop this. I'm not sure how we go forward on it, because the paper doesn't say that. But everyone around here needs to get a personal view, and then we need a collective view on, are we going to support this community and what they have requested or not? So, given that little speech, do we have a move? You want to move the paper that we have in front of us? Thank you. No, Neil moved it. You'll second it. Do you wish to speak, Neil?
Yes, I do, Mr. Chair, and I'm glad to hear your words of advice to all here today, because irrespective of one's view on the position around the Ruataniwha Dam, I for one am not prepared to throw this community under the bus in the name of a puritanical view of the world. There is a reality that our communities, both north and south, have supported economically, a large economic support to the community. Yes, it has come at an environmental cost, but that's an environmental cost we all need to share because we shared in the gains that we received. So from that perspective, Mr. Chair, I'm very supportive of a movement to consider the prospect of a time offering further time in terms of implementing Plan Change 6. But I would add this, and it follows on from your comments, that it's inevitable we need more water and we need water storage. We need a whole new train of thought around how we store water in difficult terrain down in that part of the world. So I'm interested to hear, and I for one will advocate for this council supporting in partnership the prospects around water storage. So if we combine, I think it's inevitable that we need to combine both a request for a time delay with practical solutions. It's simply not going to be tenable to rely on technology and those advances to arrive 5 years from now with a viable solution. It just won't happen. It's not reasonable. So I'm looking at the proposals that would come from the water users group in that part of the world to store water and how this council might support that. And I have no hesitation, Mr. Chair, in supporting this recommendation on the understanding that we are proceeding forward on that sort of basis.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I of course I'll support the motion that's on the table, but there are some pretty big questions in front of us that we're going to have to deal with, and go back to when we were looking at the outcomes from the review of RWSS that we did, and I can remember the panel that James Palmer put together to support that process appearing at the outset of the review findings being delivered to the council, and I still have the words ringing in my ear of one of the panel members saying to do nothing is not an option. Well, we now know that RWSS itself is probably not going to be an option, so we're now desperately searching around for other options that we can pursue, and clearly this community needs some time to do that. But if we agree to give time, don't regard it, people of Central Hawke's Bay, do not regard this as a free pass, because it's been quite frustrating watching the process of Plan Change 6 in your community. For instance, this council agreed to provide some not insignificant incentives to try and get farmers to get their farm environmental management plans in advance to avoid the avalanche we now face. And hundreds of thousands of dollars of incentives never got paid out because the community didn't take the signal. That's a problem, and it needs to be resolved. So your community needs to be galvanised to support this council in executing whatever Plan Change 6 ends up looking like. I go back 3 years when the global consent in Twyford, which you've mentioned here today, Alex, was being formed. And when Plan Change 6 was underway, we actually called a meeting of Tuki-Tuk farmers, which I went to talk about the possibility of a global consent being a solution to the increased flow rates that we were facing in the Tuki-Tuk. And how many farmers turned up? 2. There were more council staff there than there were farmers. So, you know, the ball is in your court and you have to be prepared to run with it. So, you know, I think we've got no choice but to give time, but there's got to be a meeting of minds from both sides of the fence.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'll be supporting the paper as well. I would like to say, however, I look at this whole situation with Central Hawke's Bay at the moment as being, end of the day, the war's over, we've got to win the peace, because that's where we're at. We're at the point where we need to be sitting down and talking to each other about these things. And Chair, I'd like to thank you for your eloquent words, and as well, Councillor Bevan, thank you for your words too. I really appreciate that, the comments that you made there, because I think they certainly resonate with me, and that if we give you guys an opportunity to get over this hump, you've got to take it. You can't sit back and let it all happen. It's a call to action to get your butts into gear, to do something, to take advantage of these opportunities that may not be presented to you. And like I said, I'm not unsympathetic to the position that you've been put in. I think you've been dealt a pretty raw hand of cards to play with. And I think that's really unfortunate, and I would really like to help you guys out. So, yeah, I look forward to the paper coming in December to see where we're at with all that and what we can do in that respect. So, thank you for taking the time to come up and present to us today.
Well, I'm going to support accepting the paper, but I'd like to associate myself with the far more diplomatic comments of Councillor Bevan that reflect underneath where I'm coming from. There's a price to pay here, and there needs to be some articulation, not just we're working hard on it, some process that articulates what steps will be taken to actually identify effective water use options. Notice I didn't say storage, I said effective water use options in Central Hawke's Bay. There's a lot of thinking around dryland farming. There's a lot of thinking about the degree to which if you modify farming systems, you can store substantially more water in the soil than presently is the case. So to me, it's not just about building stuff. Let's build some more storage ponds somewhere. It's really a top-to-bottom look at what kind of farming systems are best suited to the conditions going forward, which will be drier and so forth as time goes by, and seeing some evidence presented from water user folks as to what's the concreteness here. What are the actual steps that you plan to take if given this kind of delay?
Mr. Chairman, this issue really points out to us all how important and serious the work of this committee and the Regional Council is, because through its responsibilities in plan making, it offers the option of either compromise, which tries to meet the needs of the different sectors, of the need for environmental protection and the need for economic sustainability. That to me is the best way through something like this. the hard line, the ideological line, which could drive a community into dire economic circumstances, is just not tolerable for me, for Central Hawke's Bay, nor is it for Hiratonga, nor is it for Napier. And I'd just like to say that possibly some of us have been a little bit hard on our Central Hawke's Bay visitors. We need to remind ourselves that up until a couple of months ago, the Tuki catchment proposal, dealt with by the Board of Inquiry after being called in by the Ministry for the Environment, was alive and reasonably well, and there was every expectation that at least there was a very good chance that Ruataniwha would proceed and deal with the quantity issue. Now that looks particularly doubtful at this point in time, but that we've only been in that situation for 2 months, and as has been pointed out, very serious implications are looming, and without some mitigation are going to very seriously affect that major community and part of our region the summer after next.
Just in defence for the Central Hawke's Bay District Council, which I pay huge amounts of rates to, they inherited the problems with the oxidation plants. So after just under 12 months, we could hardly blame them because they've got rid of all those old fellas that were there before.
Tana Whenua, oh no, you know, before you've got your right to reply. Yes, she's reserved. I'm aware of that. That's why I'm waiting to see if anyone else wishes to speak. Jonella.
Kia ora, thank you for your presentation. I read it from page to page and really felt for the community. I cross the Red Bridge every day, so I know what the tuk-tuk looks like and what it should look like. And actually I support, our organisation would probably support looking at delaying the date for the plan change going ahead, on the basis that we have a community here that needs help and support from us. That's what we're here to do, and so we're supporting the motion that's been put on the table, and I think we also have to support our tangata whenua, which is tamatea, in terms of the employment and opportunities that would be lost to our people down there. So, kia ora.
Most of us know that environmental change takes time, and mindsets also take time. And so I'm from the Mohaka area, and we've had issues in terms of water quality, you name it, forestry, dairy farmers up the top. And we had to make our own decisions and our own sacrifices about what we do in our area. So we've made our call. We don't invest in dairy. You might have to make that call as well. We have other ethical issues as well. We don't invest in alcohol for people and all that. So you know, we've actually got to have a real look at where we are going for our communities, hey? And think about the changes that need to happen. And like Jonella, I support giving the community time, because the community I come from, they're very poor. It was only 3 weeks ago that the 40 houses in Raupunga got running water. So, you know, you talk about your issues, our people have issues as well. Kia ora.
Could I just say that I first heard about this problem of the tuki and the volume of water from Ross Bramwell. Now, he hasn't sat at this table for a long time. And Ross Bramwell made the point that the recently allocated water take in the Ruataniwha meant that the Tukituki River was going to be below what its minimum flow should be. Very clear about that. So this is a problem which has been coming from a long way back. A long way back. Every summer, when we have a dry summer, there's a lot of media comment about the state of the Tukituki. And it gets national attention, and people look at it, and it's in a terrible state. Because the river is starved of water. In the summer, it's the time it has the least input into it. And it's the summer that we are dragging the most water out of it. And it's in the summer that the Tukituki River is in trouble, and everything goes with it. Now, we are here as regulators. That's what we're here as. Environmental regulators. That's our remit, nothing else. Other things are secondary to this. So I just want to say to you, you've come here to tell us the state of the world and ask for more time. Not in itself an unreasonable thing to ask for, but I want to say to you, you're going to have a tough audience in me. Let's be upfront about it. I've sat at this table here and seen utes stick out here with signs saying, "Give us our dam," as if it was a right. I didn't hear other contribution. I've sat here and looked at how we had the uptake for the dam, and the amount of water uptake, slow, painfully slow. I didn't see out of Central Hawke's Bay a full-on commitment to the RWSS. We barely made our targets. And there are all sorts of other issues. And I would say to you that when you look at the situation, a wise and prudent person would have thought that this RWSS scheme had its problems. And if I put all my money on the RWSS happening and didn't think elsewise, I would not be a prudent operator. Prudent person would have said this has its problems and it probably has a fair chance of not happening. In that event, what am I going to do? So you've turned up here to say, basically what I've taken your message, the RWS going over is a complete shock to us. We didn't have time to think. We all decided it was the way to go, and we had no other option. So that's what we thought about. And now suddenly it's gone, and we're left, a bit dazed, a bit bewildered, trying to figure out what we've got to do. Well, I want to say to you that that's an argument you put forward, but in terms of 5 years to go from zero to a conclusion, I would have thought is quite a long time. But what I'm asking for, what I'm saying to, pitching to you here, is in fact a reflection of Peter Bevan, Councillor Bevan's point, is that I want to see a sense of urgency in this to find solutions and a sense of commitment. That's what you're going to have to demonstrate to me, because at some point in the future we're going to have another dry summer, and the Tukituki is going to be in trouble, serious trouble. And people are going to say, what are you doing as a regional council to protect our river? And then if we said, oh, well, we over-allocated the water, we had the scheme, it went flat, but the people up there didn't have enough time to make a decision. We're going to do nothing for 5 years. Going to sit and wait for 5 years until maybe we get some solutions. This is a big ask you're asking of us. Let's be clear about that. So if you want me to support the extension of time, I want to see a commitment to do something, and I want to see a commitment to be strong and convincing that we're going to get a solution quicker than what we need to now. So I want conviction out of this, not just sit and wait, and we'll think.
Any other comments before I... no, I need to... Any other comments before the mover and seconder? So Debbie, you can come on now, but remember that Neil is the mover, it's the last say.
Thank you. Thanks to me, Alex and Greg. I'd also like to acknowledge some of the people behind us, and maybe you might have the opportunity to stick around for a cup of tea. So we've got in the back here Duncan Holden, Helen Ellis, Kevin Davidson, Paul Franklin, Richard Dawson, Elliot Cooper. Who's else is holding in there? Not sure. These are really busy operators, and they've taken a day out in spring. I mean, it's the hardest time in the year to actually get off farm is in springtime, especially a beautiful day. It would have been far better for you today, I know, if it was a wet day, and I acknowledge the time you're taking out of your businesses and how difficult it is to be here. They're here because there is an issue in top of mind for them, and it's very important for these guys that they're heard. So what we're discussing today, it's not just a Central Hawke's Bay issue. We have the National Policy Statement for Freshwater Management, and it's rearing its looming head in all of the catchments in our region, and we all have that to face as a reality. What we're talking about here is an issue on timing, and for Central Hawke's Bay, I know we've got into a few discussions around Ruataniwha and FEMPS and dryland farming around the table just now, but excuse me. But today we're talking about timing, because while it may have been opportune for some to have been waiting for Ruataniwha, and some of us had more of a belief in it than others, the reality is that just back in July we discovered that Ruataniwha was looking less and less probable, and now we've got some deadlines that we need to be addressing, and it's just not practical to be able to address them. So what we're asking ultimately is that Plan Change 6 has some urgent implementation matters, predominantly of technical nature, and we need to have a look at them. It's a responsibility I believe we have as a committee and as a council. And this is not about leaving out any other stakeholders. Of course all stakeholders will be included, and as they should be. So Tom Skirman has outlined just over there that between now and our next meeting in November, he certainly intends to have that discussion, and I'm sure all of us around the table are open to that too. But today we've come and appreciated the perspective from the local iwi and the wider regional iwi hapu groups who are here with us to take on a group of Central Hawke's Bay severely impacted people and just listen to their stories and have an appreciation of some of the challenges that we are facing as a region, and they're not dissimilar to what the rest of the region will be facing as well. So I'd just like to once again acknowledge you all, Alex, Greg and the team behind you here, and the contribution you've made to finding some solutions here today. And it's a journey we're all on together, so thanks for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to conclude, I for one don't want to see this council continue to look in its rear vision mirror. I think we need to draw a line on the past and look forward. I for one also don't believe this council needs to be taking a Pontius Pilate position, wiping its hands of its the heritage that we've passed on. Following on from Councillor Barker's comments about this issue being live in former chairman's time, that was certainly true, and also true as regulator. We regulated a scenario which has ended in a mess. This is a partnership. The Tukituki River is my river, as is the Wara River, which is also mine. Mohaka River is also mine. The Ahuriri Estuary is also mine. It's all of ours, actually. It's our issue. We ought to be in partnership on it, finding any solution we can, and I hope this council is big enough to recognise its responsibilities in this regard. So I look forward to the urgency from local stakeholders who have the most economic issues at stake, for them to come back to this council, demonstrate their urgency and put proposals from which both this council can support in a number of ways. At the end of the day, the young fellows leaning against the tractor are not only Mike's nephews, they are our whānau. We have responsibilities to them as well. We are in this together, and we ought to start thinking about solutions that look as though we are together, as opposed to pointing the finger at a particular part of our community, blaming them for the situation that we have shared for a long time, and expecting them solely to come up with the answers on their own. I don't buy that, and I don't believe a regional council of our scope ought to be doing that.
Thank you, Neil. We have a mover and a seconder. All those in favour, and we're on the recommendation on page 12, which is to note the potential impacts. All those in favour? Aye. Against? It's unanimous. And I want to thank you, Alex and Greg, for coming along. You clearly had an impact, and I think you've heard what you've heard, and I think there's a strong sympathy for us working something out here. Thank you very much. Okay. It is 1:15. I think we will stop for a breather after that and come back. Thank you very much.